What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're taking a look at the Nano 13 Unknown. All right, so these are the highly requested sequel to the fan favorite Nano 10 Unknown. It's been now 3 iterations of a Nano since we last got an Unknown model, and the Unknown model really is just the mid-cut. On this shoe, there are some material differences. On the original Unknown, there were some material differences as well. But these are also based off of the Nano 13s and not the 14s. Even though we're in the 14 life cycle, these are still based off of the 13s. So all that really means is that the lift and run chassis is the same as it was on the Nano 13. The Float Ride Energy midsole is the same between the Nano 13 and Nano 14, and then the outsole Rope Pro is all the same between the Nano 13 and the Nano 14 as well. And then the upper on the shoe is completely different than the Nano 13 and also on the Nano 14. There are 2 unknown models. There are the Cordura models, which we got in the United States. They only come in black or this white colorway, which is kind of like a bone colorway. And then there are some other models that have like a ripstop kind of material, and then they have color and they look really cool. And we don't get those in the United States, which is terrible, but other places around the world get them. I think you can pick them up at the Wildlife. They might be able to ship you one. I don't know, to be honest with you. I wish we got those here because they at least look cool. Like the original Nano 10 Unknowns, which those ones looked really cool as well. But unfortunately, we only get black and white. Okay, so let's now talk about the upper of the Nano 13 Unknown with the Cordura fabric. Starting at the toe box, we've got a really lightweight mesh material. It's extremely breathable. It's flexible. It's comfortable. There's a little booty that runs in the inside of the shoe, and then the tongue is also gusseted. There are overlays all around the shoe to give it structure and some detail in certain areas. Starting at the toe bumper, we have that runs around pretty much to the middle part of the shoe and then connects into the vector. And then around the Reebok logo, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, it's like this pearlescent overlay. On the black model, it's kind of bluish. On the white model, it's just like a white pearl, and that has the Reebok logo right there. And then around the, I guess, ankle collar of the shoe, it starts transforming into the Cordura, which is pretty cool because you can't really see any seams of where it switches over to the Cordura. It just kind of blends in, and it has a really nice look in that area, but it is kind of washed out on the white, so unless you're like really looking at it, it's not something that you're gonna really notice. Around the ankle collar, we have some pods that you can see stitched in for obviously cushioning around your ankle. Around the back part, we have a pull tab, which seems pretty well constructed. And that's going to help you put these shoes on, especially because they're a mid-cut shoe. You're going to want to use that, and hopefully it holds up over time. But we do have that Cordura construction all around the ankle collar. This pull tab is pretty heavy duty by itself. Another thing that I noticed with this shoe is that the laces are a heavier lace as well. They feel like they would be the Cordura fabric as well. Problem about that is that they do tend to want to come untied. And so around certain areas of the shoe, there's also like, I don't think they're real leather, but there are leather bits around the laces at the top, and then around the back part of the shoe where the TPU heel counter is, or lift and run chassis. And those kind of have like a marbled look to it. That marbled look is also on the vector as well. I hope you can see it with the camera there, but it's nice little details, especially on this white shoe where things kind of get washed out. It's nice that they, actually tried to do something with that. Now coming around to the medial side of the shoe, it's pretty much a mirror of the lateral side. But one thing to take note here is that this part of the lift and run chassis, for whatever reason, on this shoe. And you know, now that I'm looking at it, it might be because of the gusset inside. Really does a number on the instep of your foot. I don't even have particularly wide feet, and this part of the lift and run chassis is almost always pressing into the side of my foot, and it's very distracting and it's very uncomfortable, and I'll talk more about that later, but just letting you guys know right now that that is definitely something you're gonna feel. Now, the shoe does have a 7mm drop. It's built on the same platform as the Nano 13, so that has not changed. Still has the Float Ride Energy midsole, which is comfortable for impact, I guess, reduction, but it is not soft for your lifting movements. This is still a very dense midsole. It doesn't feel like it's ever soft or ever mushy. It's just way more on the stable side. And then, of course, we have the lift and run chassis, which I should probably grab. So if you haven't seen it before, this is what the lift and run chassis looks like. It's basically the TPU heel counter extends into the metatarsal of the shoe, and it's there for extra stability when you lift and a little pop for when you run from this dome area. This dome area sits in a bed of that Float Ride Energy foam, and it's supposed to, you know, give you a little bit of pop. I don't really notice it so much there. I thought I noticed it a little bit more on the Nano 14s, but I still, you know, I don't think that these are the greatest of running shoes. And especially now that they're in the mid-top, I really don't think I would want to run in them. Another good thing about these shoes is that despite being a mid-top and having just like more bulk and more material, and just like overall just being a bigger shoe, I clock these in at the same weight as the Nano 13s at 13.6 ounces for a men's size 10.5. I was weighing a men's size 10 for the Nano 13s. So they probably shaved a little bit of weight off of them now that I think about, you know, comparing the 10 and the 10.5. So that's a good thing. They definitely didn't get any heavier despite all the added fabric of the shoe, which is a really good thing. Okay, now for sizing these, I got them in a size 10.5. My feet are just generally trending upward. Now, pretty much all of the variants of the Nano 13s, I was a size 10.5. So the Froning 13s, I was a size 10.5, and those were still very narrow, and they still had that issue with the lift and run chassis pressing up against your instep. I also had the Nano 13 Adventures in a size 10, and I could wear those, though I thought they were a little bit tight. I would definitely, if I were to buy them again, I would get a 10.5. And then when it came to the Nano Classics, I got both a 10 and a 10.5, and the 10.5 fits me far and beyond better than the 10. The 10 is actually pretty tight on my foot. So the Nano 13 Unknowns size closer in length to the Nano 13s, but they are more narrow than the normal Nano 13s in the midfoot and in right around the metatarsals, like the toe box. It does require a little bit of breaking this area in. Like I mentioned before, the lateral part of the shoe was pretty hard on the outside of my foot, and like the first workout, my feet were sore pretty much all over from all of the hot spots with the shoe. This shoe just runs just more narrow than the Nano 13. So if you're coming from Nano 13s, I would definitely recommend sizing these a half size up. If you're coming from the Fronings, you're probably just gonna wanna go the same size as the Fronings. If you're coming from Nano 14s, you're gonna go with the same size in these shoes. If you're coming from any Nike, Rad, Strike Movement shoes, you're gonna go with the same size for the Nano 13 Unknowns. Just keep in mind that these are not really good for people that have collapsed arches or like wide, just blocky feet in general. Now, what you do gain from having the mid-cut of the Nano 13 Unknowns is probably a little bit of ankle stability if you wanted to, play basketball or do like a court sport or something like that. You do get that with these shoes. You do have to tighten the shoes up quite a bit to actually get them tight around, or at least for me, because I have pretty skinny ankles. But once they're on, they're pretty comfortable from like the little pods here. I did get a little bit of like rubbing on my ankles from the collar of the shoe. It never gave me a blister, but it is definitely distracting. I would for sure wear these, or recommend wearing these with some higher socks. Don't wear them with ankle socks, at least for extended amounts of time, just because you might develop some kind of blistering or rubbing from the ankle collar on these shoes. All right, so when it comes to running, I was not a big fan of running in the Nano 13s. I thought they were pretty clunky and just generally not something that I would ever want to run anything more than 400 meters in at a time. And I feel that way with the Nano 13 Unknowns as well, maybe even more because of the higher cuts on these shoes. They affect your ankle mobility. And then another reason why I wouldn't want to run in these is because of just how much pressure the lift and run chassis puts on the instep of my foot. It's really hard. And like, I've been wearing these pretty often that hopefully that part would break in, and it hasn't. It's just pretty brutal. And that's not even the whole story. Even on the lateral side, it does press into the side of my foot. It's not nearly as bad as it is on the instep of my foot, but it's worth mentioning. And then also, the hot spots in the toe box on this shoe just make them not something that I want to be running too long in. Generally, I don't really care for running in like a high top shoe. It doesn't feel right to me. Plus the clunkiness of these shoes, it like adds into just them not being very comfortable to run in. I mean, if you're somebody that is more used to it, like I think if the ankle collar itself was maybe a little bit more cushioned and not as like sharp, then it would be more comfortable to run in these. But as it is, I just don't think that these are suited for like any real running or even any runs that you'd find in a CrossFit workout. But when it came to like just moving around in general, I thought that they were okay. They definitely do better with high socks. I wore them like half the time with high socks, half the time with low socks. And with low socks, you definitely get some chafing around the ankle collar. And it does hinder your mobility a little bit because of the ankle collar, but it's not terrible. It's not going to stop you from doing a lot of movements, or the majority of the movements that you're going to find in a CrossFit workout. Box jump overs were absolutely brutal on my feet because of the lift and run chassis. They're very responsive. The grip's pretty good, but it was destroying my feet when I was doing box jump overs yesterday, and that's going to carry over to box jumps. Like the impact on that part of the shoe is just going to destroy your feet. And then also from doing double unders, I didn't think it was as bad for doing double unders, but I was getting that soreness on the outsides of my feet from when I did a workout with a lot of double unders. One thing that's nice though is that these shoes stay on your feet pretty well for burpees. Like there's obviously not going to be any heel slip because of the mid cut. So when you're dropping down, coming back up, doing burpees, it's pretty easy to do it in these shoes. I wouldn't say it's any better than the normal Nano 13s, but I mean, looking at some of the positives of having the mid cut, that might be one of them. Along with obviously, like if you were doing sled pushes, that mid cut would probably help you out for something like that as well. Now, when it came to lifting, these were very stable shoes, but the Nano 13s are also very stable lifting shoes as well, and there's really no difference in how I felt lifting in these and the Nano 13s, other than the fact that the ankle collar is kind of a hindrance to me for just like ankle mobility. My ankle mobility is really good, so if I have something like this and it's blocking my ankle mobility, it's not doing me any kind of favors. And I think that generally that's not a good thing when you're looking at squatting pretty deep, catching any Olympic weightlifting movement pretty deep. And overall, like I just don't really see why you would need a mid cut for doing Olympic weightlifting or CrossFit. It just doesn't really like make any kind of sense to me. Same thing goes for anything where you need to get depth with. It just doesn't really make sense to me. I would say that if you were looking for a shoe to, I guess, I don't know, maybe go hiking or rucking in where the ankle mobility isn't such an issue and you wanted more stability around the ankle, then that would make more sense. But Otherwise, yeah, and you could also wear these loose, which is the majority of my time in these shoes. I don't really tighten up the ankle collar just because I don't want it to hinder my ankle mobility. But at the same time, then you just get all this like material around your ankle, and it's just for me, it's just a little bothersome. I don't really see the use. So the Nano 13 Unknowns retail for $160. For $160, what are you getting with this shoe? You're getting a mid-top if you wanted a mid-top. But unlike the Nano 10s, where you actually got some pretty good benefits from the Nano 10 Unknowns. They were lighter than the original Nano 10s, which were bricks. The Nano 10 Unknowns, for some reason, were way lighter than those shoes. And then another thing that you got from the Nano 10 Unknowns was that they looked really cool. They were arguably one of the best looking like CrossFit shoes ever made. And I would say with the normal Nano 13 Unknowns, those are actually pretty decent looking as well. But if you're in the United States and you're stuck with just the black or the white ones that are pretty bland, and I honestly don't really like the way that the Cordura looks. I think it looks, it doesn't look that great to me. It doesn't really appeal to me at all. Then you're not, for me, I'm not really getting any kind of use out of this shoe. I don't really honestly see why anybody would need this, or myself personally, I don't see why I would need this. But that's me personally. Like, I just don't really see the need for mid or high top shoes in CrossFit. But if you're somebody that needs more structure around your ankle, maybe have glass ankles or something, then I would say maybe check these shoes out. They're not a bad shoe. Like, by all means, they're still a Nano 13, and the Nano 13 was my favorite training shoe from 2023. It's a very good training shoe, and this is just a mid-cut version of the Nano 13. It might be a little bit lighter, but for all intents and purposes, it just doesn't really make any sense for my personal use. But to each their own, and if you like the Nano 13s and you wanted something that had a mid-cut, then I would say that these are probably gonna be an okay pick for you, as long as you don't have wide feet, because these things, like, and for me personally, I don't really have wide feet, and these things are brutal on my feet. So really only narrow foot people that have really high arches should look into this shoe. If you have like a collapsed arch, don't even bother. It's gonna be pretty brutal. So if you guys have any questions about the Nano 13 Unknowns, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always, guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.